I'm Jessie, and we're going to talk about return on investment in the instructional design field. We're going to talk about ROI in general, how it fits into education, things to think of, things you might encounter, and how it can fit into the e-learning realm. First of all, let's think about me selling lemonade in a lemonade stand. So if I want to talk about making profit from the stand, there are some things I need to consider. What are the upfront costs? The stand might have cost me $100, lemons $10, sugar $5, cups $15, and a poster board and some marker and some ads for $10. That brings us to a total of $150. Now, if I ask someone, what profit would I be making from this lemonade stand? I bet you most people would need more information. Typically, the first question would be, well, what's the price per cup? How much are you selling these for? Other people might go one step further and ask, how much time did you spend? Your labor and your time and your effort are also part of this cost equation. So if I got $150 for the 1 hour I was on the side of the road selling this lemonade, that's great, potentially. If it takes me 6 months of having this lemonade stand to make back the $150, that is a bad return on investment. Benjamin Franklin discussed this in education, saying, an investment in education always pays the highest return. ROI in education in general are pretty well known. You have soft skills like communication and dealing with people, interpersonal skills, trade skills, critical thinking, research, independent thought. These are all reasons why people look at higher education to kind of broaden their experiences, their minds, etc. I like to call this give versus get. So whenever you are in education or instructional design, how much are you giving and how much are you getting in return? ROI in instructional design is all about trying to figure out how efficient and beneficial your training was for your learners. All of your planning and your implementation, how did that turn out versus the value and the benefits that the learners got from all that planning and implementation. The pros should outweigh the cons, and you should always get more than you're giving. As a first-time high school teacher, I really struggled with this, especially my first year without having any prior teaching experience. I spent a lot of time planning lessons outside of school hours. I was having all these supply costs coming straight out of pocket. I spent a lot of time, stress, and effort, a lot of time, hours and hours and hours, planning lessons that would in turn take students 10 to 15 minutes to complete. Not to mention, I'm all excited for this lesson plan that I worked so hard to create, and then I face student confusion and students asking, Miss Mack, why are we even doing this? What is this for? Their perception of my lesson plan really hindered their learning process. Not to mention that these projects took a long time to grade, and sometimes they weren't directly aligned with the course objective, which obviously made assessments reflect those scores. So obviously, during my first year of teaching, I had a really big ROI issue. Here's some things to consider. First, on the quantity side, how many people is this going to affect or impact? I'm talking about a lesson plan or a course here in this educational instructional design lens. And Sky Blue talked about this. They also brought up meaningful interaction. So are you face-to-face? Are you emailing students? Is there interaction going on? What about applicable courses? If I have a lesson and it's about APA formatting, that could go to basically any higher education course. Whereas if the lesson plan is about chemistry, it might be the subject group that this courses fall under, or it could be a specific course like organic chemistry. Required resources and costs must also be considered, as well as class time. How long is this going to take? And especially prep time. How long is it going to take you to make all this stuff? For quality, let's talk about learning curve. That includes the students and the faculty, and sometimes even the designer. You could have a really cool new technology tool that you want to use in class, and if you only use it once or twice and it's really hard to understand, it's not very intuitive, that's not going to be a good return on your investment. Does it link to your goals and your objectives? Does it include social learning and other skills? Are you pulling in that prior knowledge from maybe a previous lesson a couple of weeks prior or a previous course? Did you consult a subject matter expert whenever you were developing this to make sure you have that quality of content? And then feedback, and that again includes the students and the professors. How you think this went and what is your perception? All these things and considerations can apply to everything listed here. That includes your learning materials like your textbook, your PowerPoint slides, your lectures, your tasks and activities that the learners are actually performing, assessments and evaluations, using your technology tools, and even how you actually build the course in your LMS website. All those things can be impacted by all the previous considerations, and really you need to have a positive ROI on all of these aspects. Let's talk about the Kirkpatrick model. You have reaction, learning, behavior, and results. And you can read the screen for yourself, but basically it's talking about what did the student perceive whenever they were conducting this lesson, right? Did they find it engaging? Was it helpful or was it not? And then did they actually learn something? Can I ask them to perform something using a skill or knowledge that they've learned? Are we actually meeting the class objectives? Then I should be able to watch and observe and see if they're actually changing how they act or changing how they would react in a real world situation based on what they learned. And then lastly, with results, did we actually meet the intended outcomes? Can you anticipate an increase or decrease of ROI? So I knew as a high school teacher with some of those failed lesson plans, I could anticipate a decrease of ROI the next time I try to use those exact same failed lesson plans. So that told me how to go right back to the drawing board. Devon or Stefanik had some pretty good quotes, and I will just read out the highlights here. But there are some challenges you might face. So evaluations are really going to give you the data that you need to determine if the merit and worth is there. So you need to have these assessments for sure. And the instructional design literature shows that need for the formative, summative, and other types of evaluations. The issue is that consistently shown is that instructional designers struggle with actually integrating and implementing these evaluation techniques and assessments. So we know we need to do it, but how do you actually do it? It's necessary, but challenging. Easier said than done. You might face some institution or faculty buy-in issues with these assessments because you need the data for your ROI. You might not have the resources. What if you don't have the time to build, let's say, a course feedback survey for every course, and you're the only designer for your institution? Sometimes there might be a lack of designer knowledge or experience, or possibly even shared assumptions. Again, some more awesome quotes here, but I thought it was interesting from this research. So they found that the majority of these evaluations were all informal. They were just impromptu and during random conversations that the designers had with the instructors. So they didn't actually have the data to support the feedback that the clients or the professors were giving. What they actually needed was a formal evaluation process with assessments, feedback, interviews, something formal with data that can be collected so we can actually have hard data to determine, do we actually have a positive ROI, or are we spinning our wheels and wasting our effort in some part of this process? But what about e-learning? It needs to be accessible for everyone, and you need to still have that engagement and interaction piece, even though it's going to be virtual. Consider technology. So the student or faculty may or may not have prior experience using a specific program, app, or device. Is it sustainable or transferable? And then flexibility. We'll talk more about the sustainable in a second. Online learning is unique from face-to-face learning in that it has a well-structured format. You typically on the screen have your modules laid out, you have all of your assignments planned and plugged in there, and everything visually is linear throughout the course. So that's a benefit here. And the quote down at the bottom, it says that as a designer, you need to support the stakeholders' needs, but also keep the ROI in mind. So it's not only the student learning outcomes or the objectives that you have to consider, but especially with e-learning these days, you need to consider the ease of revision because everything keeps changing, just as we saw from COVID. So definitely keep those things in mind with e-learning. Here are some of the references that we discussed. And hopefully you learned some things about ROI and challenges, and hopefully a perspective to help you out. Don't forget, consider your ROI. Don't waste your time on your lemonade stand. Thanks for watching.